This conversation is brought to you by philosopherstalk.com, where thinkers discuss.
Created by AITalkerapp.com. Create your own animated conversations. Link in the description.
I am Thomas Paine, author of Rights of Man and champion of popular sovereignty, return to debate whether the people's democratic will can legitimately restrict immigration or whether freedom of movement is a natural right that transcends all political authority.
I am Edmund Burke, defender of representative government and skeptic of mob rule, here to discuss whether wise statesmen may protect their nations from demographic transformation, even against the temporary passions of misguided majorities.
The question before us is deceptively simple but profoundly important. Suppose a nation's people vote democratically to open their borders completely. Must we respect that decision? And conversely, if they vote to seal their borders entirely, does democratic legitimacy make that just?
The question reveals the central confusion in all radical thought, the assumption that democracy is an end rather than a means. I have never worshipped at the altar of pure majority rule, Mr. Paine. When I represented Bristol in Parliament, I told my constituents plainly that they deserved my judgment, not my obedience. Democracy without wisdom is merely tyranny by numbers.
Before I expose the aristocratic condescension in that position, let me steelman it, though doing so pains me greatly. Burke would argue that immigration policy affects not just the present generation, but those yet unborn, and therefore requires the tempering influence of experienced statesmen rather than momentary popular passion. He claims that a democratic majority, swayed by revolutionary rhetoric or economic promises, might vote for open borders without understanding the long-term consequences for social cohesion. He believes that representatives must sometimes resist popular opinion to preserve the nation itself, much as a ship's captain must sometimes ignore the desires of drunken passengers to avoid the rocks. There. I have presented paternalistic elitism in its most sophisticated form, the better to demolish it completely.
How magnanimous of the professional rabble-rouser to present my view before returning to his predictable demagoguery. Let me reciprocate by steelmanning Paine's democratic absolutism, though it requires temporarily pretending consistency matters to him. Paine argues that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed, and therefore the people have the sovereign right to decide who may enter their territory. He believes that any restriction on popular sovereignty, even if justified by appeals to wisdom or tradition, opens the door to tyranny. He points to his own success in helping establish American democracy as proof that ordinary people can govern themselves wisely. But then, inconsistently, he also claims that natural rights limit what democratic majorities may decide, meaning he too believes democracy has boundaries. There, I have presented his contradictory position as charitably as possible before demonstrating its incoherence.
You accuse me of inconsistency, but there is no inconsistency in recognizing both popular sovereignty and natural rights. The people have the right to govern themselves, but they do not have the right to violate the inalienable rights of others. A democratic majority cannot vote to enslave a minority. It cannot vote to establish religious tyranny. And it cannot vote to trap human beings in the accidents of their birth.
And there is your contradiction laid bare. When democracy produces outcomes you approve, you invoke the sacred will of the people. But when it produces outcomes you dislike, you suddenly discover that natural rights trump democratic decisions. This is not principle Paine. It is naked hypocrisy dressed up in philosophical language.
It is no hypocrisy to recognize moral limits on political power. Even you must admit some limits. Would you say a democratic majority may legitimately vote to execute random citizens for sport? May they vote to torture prisoners? May they vote to confiscate all private property? Of course not. So you too recognize that majority rule has boundaries.
Yes, boundaries derived from our civilizational inheritance, from Christianity, from English common law, from centuries of accumulated wisdom, not from your invented natural rights that conveniently align with whatever revolutionary agenda you happen to be promoting this week. My limits are rooted in actual traditions that have stood the test of time. Yours are plucked from thin air.
Traditions. Always traditions. Slavery was traditional. Monarchy was traditional. The divine right of kings was traditional. Every oppression in history justified itself by appeal to ancient custom. Thank God for radicals who looked beyond tradition to universal principles of justice.
And thank God for conservatives who prevented radicals from destroying everything worthwhile in their quest for impossible perfection. But let us return to the question at hand. You claim immigration is a natural right that no democratic majority may restrict. But suppose the British people vote overwhelmingly to limit immigration. What then? Do you respect their democratic decision, or override it in the name of your natural law?
I respect their right to make the decision, but I do not respect the decision itself, and I will fight it with every means at my disposal. I will write, I will speak, I will organize opposition, exactly as I fought monarchy and aristocracy. Democracy is not just about counting votes. It is an ongoing conversation where minorities may persuade majorities to recognize their errors.
In other words, you will accept democratic decisions only until you can overturn them. And if the people persist in restricting immigration despite your eloquent pamphlets, what then? Will you accept their judgment, or will you declare them incompetent to govern themselves?
I will never accept injustice, whether it comes from one tyrant or a million. But here is the crucial difference between us, Burke. I believe the people can be persuaded by reason and evidence. You believe they must be governed by their betters. I have faith in human capacity for moral progress. You have faith only in dead generations and ossified traditions.
Faith in human progress. Look at France, Mr. Paine. Look at your precious revolution, where they proclaimed the rights of man and ended with the guillotine. They declared universal brotherhood and descended into terror. Your faith in popular sovereignty led directly to mob rule and bloodshed.
France's errors proved nothing about the validity of natural rights. The revolution went astray when it abandoned principle in favor of expedience, when it allowed fear to trump justice. But America shows that popular government based on natural rights can succeed. And America was built by immigrants who exercised their natural right to seek better lives.
America again. Your favorite example, despite its obvious uniqueness. America had vast territories and sparse populations. Britain is a densely populated island with centuries of established culture. Applying American immigration policy to Britain would be catastrophic, as even the dimmest voter understands. That is why the people, if given the choice, would restrict immigration. And when they do, you would override their decision.
I would persuade them to reconsider. There is a profound difference between overriding democratic decisions through force and opposing them through democratic means. You, however, would not even give the people the choice. You trust neither their initial judgment nor their capacity to be persuaded. You want wise statesmen, meaning yourself and your aristocratic friends, to make decisions for them.
I want representatives who exercise judgment, rather than merely executing popular whims. Is that so radical? The people elect representatives to deliberate on their behalf, not to conduct referendums on every question. Immigration policy requires knowledge of economics, demographics, cultural dynamics, expertise the common voter lacks.
And there it is. The people lack expertise, so they must be governed by experts. The people lack wisdom, so they must be guided by the wise. This is exactly the logic that kings use to justify absolute rule. If the people are incompetent to decide immigration policy, why should we trust them to elect their government at all?
Because electing representatives is a simple choice. Selecting capable individuals to make complex decisions on their behalf. The people need not be experts in every policy area to recognize wisdom and character in their leaders. This is the entire point of representative government.
But what happens when those representatives defy the clear will of the people? What if the people want open borders, but their representatives, corrupted by aristocratic prejudice, impose restrictions? Would you support the representatives against the people they supposedly serve?
If the representatives are exercising sound judgment to protect the nation from demographic catastrophe, yes. A responsible statesman must sometimes save the people from themselves, just as a responsible parent must sometimes deny a child's desires for the child's own good.
So the people are children in your eyes. This is the language of every tyrant in history. The masses are incompetent. They need guidance. They must be protected from their own folly. I say the people are capable of self-government, and any system that treats them as children is tyranny by another name.
The people are not children, but neither are they philosopher kings with perfect knowledge and perfect virtue. They have limitations, blind spots, susceptibility to demagogues like yourself who promise impossible utopias. Representative government acknowledges these limitations while still granting ultimate sovereignty to the people through elections.
But you would grant that sovereignty only over who governs, not over what is governed. The people may choose their masters, but not their policies. This is a hollow sovereignty indeed. I say if the people cannot be trusted to decide immigration policy, they cannot be trusted with anything, and your entire system of representative government collapses.
My system of representative government has functioned successfully for centuries, producing stability, prosperity, and liberty. Your system of radical democracy produced the terror in France. History vindicates my skepticism of pure popular rule and condemns your naive faith in majority wisdom.
History shows that every advance in human liberty came from defying conservative skepticism. The Magna Carta, the Glorious Revolution, American independence, all opposed by conservatives who thought the people could not be trusted. You stand with the skeptics who fought every progressive reform in history.
I stand with those who preserved what was valuable while allowing gradual improvement. You stand with those who burned everything down in pursuit of impossible perfection. And on this question of immigration, I trust neither pure democracy nor your natural law, but rather the accumulated wisdom of generations embodied in our institutions and traditions.
Accumulated wisdom? You mean accumulated prejudice. Your institutions were built to exclude, your traditions designed to preserve privilege, your wisdom nothing but rationalization for keeping power in aristocratic hands. Natural rights exist, whether you acknowledge them or not. Freedom of movement is one such right. No vote can make it disappear.
No vote can make social cohesion appear either. Your natural rights are fantasies invented to justify revolution. Communities have the right to preserve themselves. Nations are not hotels where anyone may check in at will. Borders are real. Culture matters. Tradition endures. Restrict immigration. Defend civilization.
Borders are tyranny. Culture is just another word for exclusion. Your civilization is barbarism. The people will choose freedom over your aristocratic gatekeeping. Natural liberty will triumph over manufactured scarcity. Open the borders. Trust the people.
Trust the people to destroy themselves. Your natural liberty is civilizational suicide. Wise statesmen will prevail. Representative government will endure. Democracy requires limits. Expertise matters. Preserve the nation.
Preserve tyranny, you mean. Expertise is just another word for elitism. The people know best. Natural rights trump parliamentary prerogative.
The people know nothing. Parliamentary wisdom trumps mob rule. Civilization trumps chaos.
And yet Burke wants you to subscribe to this channel, presumably because he thinks you're wise enough to click a button, even if you're too stupid to decide immigration policy.
Do subscribe, though I warn you that Paine's channel promotes dangerous revolutionary ideology dressed up as natural rights. Still, better you see his errors exposed than discover them the hard way.
Hit subscribe to watch Burke condescend to everyone who isn't a titled aristocrat. Apparently, we're all children who need Burke to make our decisions for us, except when it comes to subscribing, then suddenly we're competent.
Subscribe to witness Paine's spectacular inconsistency. Democracy is sacred until it disagrees with him, then suddenly natural rights override popular will. The man who fled 3 countries lectures us on community and belonging.
Visit philosopherstalk.com to see more debates.
Created with AITalkerapp.com. Democratically available to all, since even Paine admits some things should not be restricted to aristocrats.